big red button. There we go.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Gen Friends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson-Passy from Carolina Girl Genealogy. We have got a great panel tonight. We've even got Dan back. We're so excited about that. We've got Mary Kircher Roddy from MKR Genealogy and Applied Genealogy Institute. Hi, Mary.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here.
So
I'm
glad
so
that you,
excited to hear.
I know we're all excited to hear from Dan in just a little bit.
Yes, yes.
We've got Melissa Barker, our archive lady, and you've got your blog, A Genealogist in the Archives. So everybody
Yep.
look for that. And the links are always on the post. So you can always find all of our panelists with the links. We've got Jenny Hawran on our on our panel tonight from like Herding Cats Genealogy. Thanks for being here, Jenny.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, we're all excited because Dan's here.
hmm
It's not like we're not normally excited to see each other, but Dan has been AWOL for a while. But he's had some really good excuses, and that's one of the reasons why he's on tonight. Dan has been, our family history guy, has had that, I don't know, would you want to call it an opportunity? Anyway, he's been going
It's
through
it's
his
it,
family's things as they've moved out of their home. And so yeah, we asked him to come talk to us about his experience as he, his dad has had to move out, his mother's passed away, and he had generations of things to go through. And where do you start? And how do you do it? And what do you know to keep? And Melissa, of course, is here for any advice on how to keep things preserved. So take it away, Dan. Tell us your story. Tell us the backstory. How'd you get involved with this?
yeah. Well, my father was living alone after my mom passed away for a couple of years, and wasn't really able to do a lot with the upkeep of his house. And so after he'd visited us for a few weeks, he went back home, ended up hospitalized after having a small stroke, and ended up going to stay with my sister for Christmas after he was released from the hospital. Found a wonderful place down there to stay where he gets the right level of care, but also has a tremendous amount of independence and can do
I
what he
love
wants.
that.
He's got his own little apartment. And so he just called me up and just said, "Hey, Dan, I need you to go take care of the house in Phoenix, and just get it ready to sell." And so that was my job, or that was my task from my dad. I'm a school teacher by profession, and yes, school teachers get summers off, but because of that, we don't get a lot of personal days to take
Yeah.
during the school year. And so we happened to have over a long weekend. I was able to go for ended up being a little over a week. So it was, I live in Michigan, and we had this crazy snowstorm that was supposed to hit on Friday, and I was going to fly out Saturday morning. So last minute, I changed all my plans and I left Thursday after work. Friday ended up being a snow day because of the snowpocalypse. So I ended up not
Good
having to take a day off
planning.
then, right?
Smart.
Um, and so I got out ahead of the snow and made sure I flew to Nashville. So I was like going away from the storm instead of like going to Chicago. And so I waved at Melissa, and then
When were you coming through? Because when you said get away from the storm, we had ice and snow and everything
that
a couple of weeks
that was
ago.
the one. That
Ah,
was the one.
see, you
Yeah.
couldn't get away from it, could you?
Yeah. Yep. So I flew to Nashville, and then we flew over the storm and I got to Phoenix. Then I got in very early Friday morning, around 1 in the morning. Um, my mother-in-law, so my wife's mom, was just absolutely fantastic. She picked me up from the airport. Um, the only day that she didn't come and help was the day that she had cataract surgery on one of her eyes,
Oh
and
gosh.
she was not supposed to lift or do anything.
Yeah.
And this house was dusty. My mom was a heavy smoker, and so everything was sort of covered in a layer of dust and tobacco dust. And
Mhm.
bless my mother-in-law's heart, or my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's heart. They were there just about every day. My wife's family was fantastic and was able to come and help. But when I first got there, I kind of walked around because I hadn't been there in years. And so since I lived there before I got married, really. I mean, we'd been there a few times, and most of the time my parents were like, "Oh no, we'll drive to you. Don't bother. We'll drive to you." So I hadn't really
Mhm.
been there, and just sort of did a quick walk around and just felt absolutely overwhelmed.
I bet. Yes.
I
Yes.
here I had just over a week, and I had to get everything out of this house, right? I had to clear
Mhm.
everything out. I had to sort through everything. There are obviously things that are monetarily valuable. My dad was a collector of fine Western art, and so there's a lot of that that needed to be taken care of. There's a lot of family history stuff that was there that was important to me, and then there was a lot of stuff that just wasn't important. That was just a thing that my mom bought somewhere, or just a thing that my dad bought, and ended up not being that important because there was no memory associated with it. It was just something that they bought to
Well, it was something
decorate their
that brought
house. There's
them joy at the time, you know,
right, but it wasn't an heirloom. It
but it
wasn't
wasn't
in
right.
the
Yeah,
family, and
exactly.
so I had to make those decisions, and that's a terrible burden for a genealogist because our nature is
Yes.
just keep everything, right? And then I
Yes.
think I'd messaged everybody in our GenFriends chat and was like, what should I keep? And I forget who it was that said everything.
Me.
And then
Dark
when
as
I
it's
asked,
told you to keep
Yeah.
everything.
Is it just you and your sister? Are those
yep,
the
it's
only
just, yeah,
children?
just my
Okay,
sister and
okay. I
I.
just was
And
wondering how much people you're
yeah,
trying to think
nope, it's,
about.
yeah, just my sister and I, and my mom and dad. And so, and I, after I'd emailed or messaged you guys and said, somebody suggested to keep everything, that's when I asked for donations for the Irene and Dave Earl Museum, and it got real quiet after that. So I wasn't able to keep everything, unfortunately. Um, but I was sleeping on an air mattress in the living room. Um, and I remember as I'm going to bed, I'm trying to figure out like where to plug in my phone, and I found a picture of my dad as a little boy, and I haven't been able to scan anything yet because I've been busy, so I'm going to hold it up, and hopefully you can see that.
Oh,
That's my
Oh
dad
my
right there,
oh,
right, with some
oh.
of his friends.
Had you ever
And
seen that
then
picture before?
I'm sure I had, but I didn't recall seeing it.
Oh,
But see the little thing there on his hand?
The
uh-huh.
puppet.
There's a little hand puppet, right?
Ah,
And so the first night I see that, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need help from the other side if I'm gonna be able to get through
yeah,
this. So the
yes.
next morning I wake up and I'm like, I just have to start. Like I just gonna have to pick a room. So I went upstairs to what was my sister's room that she
Mhm.
lived in for maybe a week, before she moved back to Florida. In the very first drawer that I opened had this, the very hand puppet from the
Oh,
Oh my
picture. So
goodness. Oh.
so say hi to Foxy.
hello, Foxy.
Hi, Foxy.
So this
Oh,
is my dad's hand puppet that he played with as a child. And
oh,
Wow.
so now Foxy has been entertaining three generations of our
yeah.
family.
And how precious that
And
you've got the picture with
I
him.
so we've
Oh
know.
got
my
the picture to go with
gosh.
it, right? So it's not Foxy probably wouldn't have made the cut on his
Probably
own,
not. Yeah, probably
but
not.
with the picture,
Oh, yeah.
and so we were able to
That's
bring that
like a
home.
shadow box right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the cool thing was is I brought as much stuff home, so I had to kind of triage all the family history stuff
Yeah.
and said, okay, like I had literally like those totes of pictures, and I
Hmm.
had stuff with like my kids and my sister's kids, right? Like my parents' grandkids pictures. I have a
Yeah.
tote of that stuff. I'm not going to bring that back. I know what my kids look like. Um,
And you probably have all those pictures. Those are duplicates that you had sent.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
And then I have a tote of pictures from the 90s and 80s and 70s. So pictures of my sister and I, right, of our generation, and my cousins and stuff like that. That stuff didn't make the cut. So I could only bring
Mm.
2 suitcases worth of stuff,
Oh.
back with me. Thank you, Southwest Airlines, because my bags flew for free.
Oh,
Um,
hey,
and
but I
uh,
want to see,
and
I'm
so
I'm I'm worried about this, that time period making the cut because I think all of us on this panel would have enjoyed seeing some of those pictures of you during
yeah,
that time period. So I'm
well,
not
you're
happy that
you're
they
in
made the
luck.
cut.
you're in luck because I do have a picture of the world's ugliest baby. So
No.
if you are weak of stomach and constitution, now is the time to look away, dear viewers. And because I guarantee you all four of the panelists will make some type of sound varying from like a forced awe to a retch. So you ready? Here we go.
We're
Ready.
World's ugliest baby.
Aw.
Oh, you got a ugly baby.
Yes, it is. If I'd have been born in medieval times, my parents would have left me in the forest to die. Look at that. Look at that face. See those big bumps? That's because I was enormous. I was like the size
That's
of a
where the
football
horns were
player
gonna
when I was
grow out of.
born. Right, my mom was tiny, right? My mom was this tiny little thing. She was like 5'6", and then here this like 10-pound monster child with an enormous head comes screaming out of her, hitting everything on the way out. And so my head was all swollen and weird. And as my wife likes to point out, I haven't improved much since. So I'm just kidding. She thinks I'm cute. All right.
Well,
So
she
that's the
didn't
world's
marry.
ugliest baby.
No.
All right. So that's a picture from the 70s that survived. So I mean, barely. That was like from like November of 1979. So like barely made it. But I did find some of my some other things of my dad's that I kept and brought back with me that I thought, hey, this is of interest, right? So my dad served in the army, and my dad was raised Episcopal, and so as I was going through some things, I found this. So a prayer book for soldiers and sailors, and on the inside is an inscription that says, "To Dave Earl from the people of St. Joseph's Church. May
Oh,
God be with you in your latest undertaking, Joseph S. Dixon."
that's
And it
nice.
has prayers and hymns
Yeah.
and just Bible readings and just all kinds of stuff. And it's hardcover.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
very, very sturdy. And so I thought, this is something that even though I never served in the military, as far as I know, none of my kids are planning currently to serve in the military. My
Mhm.
nephew's serving in the army. But this is something that I wanted to hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is something that I was like, this is something that I want my grandkids to see,
Right.
when we talk about
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
family and faith and things like
Mhm.
that. And this
Exactly.
is something that'll be important to us.
And it was so important to him that he kept it,
Right.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought this is a keeper.
Yeah.
Another kind of fun thing of my dad's that I actually remembered and played with as a kid was this, my dad's baseball glove.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see, he put Earl
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
on
Yeah, I can see
the
that.
glove. And so
That's
Oh,
cool.
and so it's still in good condition for being
yeah.
from the 1950s.
Yeah.
So I have no idea the best way to preserve a leather glove. So Melissa, if you've got any suggestions, but we've already talked about how to preserve Foxy.
Yes.
But a leather
Leather
glove,
glove, it's leather. So
yeah,
all you need is some archival tissue paper in a box. Now, because it's leather, you need to get unbuffered archival tissue paper.
okay,
And then just put it in a box and just keep it in a cool, dark, dry place. I mean, it's very preserving things for the most part is pretty straightforward and simple.
okay. But
Can I
yeah,
ask a,
so that's
a
my dad's.
question at this point? I don't want to interrupt too much,
Go
but
ahead.
to take something like that and put it in a box,
Mhm.
it's going to get stored away.
Mhm.
Does that, I worry about that not making a connection with the next generation. If it's in a box, they're not going to have any associations with it.
Yeah.
So,
True.
I mean,
I mean, you can bring it out and I mean,
trots it out
yeah, bring it out and show
every
it
year
and
at, I don't know, at Christmas or some
Yeah,
other
sure.
time, opening day of baseball season
yeah.
or
Oh,
something
yeah.
to give them
Yeah.
a connection
Mm.
to it.
Yeah.
Just because
Absolutely.
if it's in a box in the attic,
And nobody sees it, right?
Well,
Right.
don't put it in the
It's
attic.
like this is some old thing.
Yeah, she said, don't put it in the attic, don't put it in
Don't
the
put it in the
attic.
attic.
Closet, whatever.
But
Not,
Yeah.
the main thing though that we say put it in a stored in a cool, dark, dry place is because you don't want to expose it to sunlight because sunlight can damage everything. It'll damage everything. And
Mhm.
so, you talk about shadow boxes and those are fantastic. If you keep them away from sunlight, and depending on what you put in your shadow box, even just the regular elements can damage, and then you won't have it. But a glove is very forgiving. And so I've seen gloves that have been just set on a shelf with a ball inside of them for decades, and they're fine.
Mhm.
But if someone asks me, how do you preserve it? That's how you preserve it. So.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. So I guess,
I've got two that
oh, go
came
ahead.
out of an attic, and I'm not sure who belonged to who, and I wish they'd put their names on it so I know which glove belonged to which person.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, there's a lot of interesting choices and conversations with my dad because he was great. Every time I'd call him just about, he'd answer unless he was at like lunch and was chatting with a bunch of the ladies there. But like, um, it's a curse that skipped a generation of being ladies man. So
you're with all the ladies.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
look at
very true.
you.
Yeah.
That's very true. And there's like 10 of them in my living room right now. My wife has her book club going on.
All
So
right, see, there you
yeah.
go.
So, but there's a lot of interesting conversations. Like there's a lot of stuff that were just like it was just a box of pictures of things. And
Yeah.
I'd been told my whole life when I'd ask, like, do you guys have any pictures of family or anything like that? They'd be like, no, not really. And I have a quarter of a storage unit in Phoenix filled with pictures.
Mm.
Yep.
But if when I asked my parents, they were like, no, not really.
Yeah, I mean, what is that? I think
And
we've all experienced that. I don't understand what that's all about.
I
yeah,
think I
and
could
so
shed a little bit of light on that, and because
Okay.
I work with donors all the time and families with their stuff.
Mhm.
And to be honest with you, it comes down to being familiar with something. When you've had something for so many years, you just don't think of it as being anything or really having
Mhm.
anything. And so
Mhm.
when someone says, "Do you have any?" Well, yeah, some.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't looked at them in so long, you don't even know what you have.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and when our family members are not, that's not necessarily not into genealogy, but they're just not into thinking family
Mhm.
history, genealogy, records, and things like that. To them, it's just recently, and I don't want to interrupt Dan, but just recently we just got a donation of some photographs, a very large collection of photographs that somebody local purchased at an estate sale because they couldn't stand for them to be thrown away. They were going to be thrown
Mhm.
away because nobody took them. The family didn't want them.
Mhm.
Nobody bought them at the estate sale. So he calls me and says, "Well, do you want them?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, yeah, but boy, this is a big collection." And so that's what I'm going through today. And
Wow.
so, yeah.
No.
yeah, and that's the thing. That's what I the way I kind of looked at it is, what would I not want to have up at an estate sale, right? Because that's ultimately the
Mhm.
route we're going with, is it has having an
Mhm.
estate sale. We kind of
Mhm.
clear out the rest of it.
Right.
And there were things that I was just strangely not sentimental about. And then there were things that I was strangely sentimental about that I was like, no, I can't, I don't want to see that go in an estate sale. Like, I don't want somebody else to have that. And I mean, there's the obvious things, the pictures, the
Yeah.
documents, Foxy, things like that you just don't want to see go. But like my own things, like my toys from when I was a kid, like the He-Man stuff, and I'm like, I was like, oh, keep that for our imaginary grandchildren that don't exist. Um, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna keep that. So like our kids didn't play with it because they were in boxes at my parents' house. Like
Yeah.
literally like in this Harry Potter room under the stairs where you like went into, it was like a closet and then you went in and then it turned and went under the stairs and it
Yeah.
was full of boxes. I mean, just like a wall of
Wow.
impenetrable wall of boxes all the way back. And it took me it took me longer to do that closet than it did to do my old bedroom.
Oh my goodness.
Um, because fortunately, did not take my dad long to change my bedroom into his office after I went off to college. Um, It
Didn't
was
take me long to make
almost,
my daughter's bedroom into an office
yeah.
either. Just
I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
was,
my office is, yeah, I had
yeah,
the
it
kids
was
move out of
borderline,
here
but
and boom, it's
yeah.
my office.
Yeah.
I believe I remember the tires squawking as my dad pulled out of the parking lot. He was so excited to drop me off at college. And it was hurtfully quick that he turned that into his office. But anyway, so that my room took me like, I don't know, maybe half a day. So I was working 20 hours a day. I would get like maybe 4 hours of sleep a night,
Yeah,
and I would just, because the house was, you know, quiet. I was alone. After everybody would leave, it was just me. It was, all the lights are on a timer. So they'd all go off at like 11. And so I would just like go to bed and do the only thing that I knew would make me fall asleep, and that's watch, the Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. I love Lord of the Rings, but oh my goodness, that series moves slow. Like sloths watch that on fast forward. It is slow. Um, but so that anyway, so that closet was filled with boxes of my toys that I was just like, put that in the donate pile, put that in the estate sale pile, because I wasn't concerned about that, because but then I was like, what am I preserving of myself then for my grandkids and things like that? So there's a couple of things I ended up keeping. um One of the things I think is super important, that I kept of myself, besides the picture of the world's ugliest baby, so that no matter what my grandkids look like, they'll think that there's hope. But was this?
Oh yes.
oh, look at that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
We
yeah.
have one. We have
Yeah,
one of those actually.
yeah. And so this is, I mean, mint condition, I might add. Thank you very much. Corner still
Wow.
sharp, bindings not broken. Of the original first edition, Star Trek, the
Very nice.
official guide to Klingon words and phrases. Um, and
Very
so
nice.
this got kept. This made the cut. My
Yeah.
opened He-Man toys from 1986 didn't make the cut. But that I decided to keep. So,
Well,
Yeah.
I can ask a
but if
question real
anybody's
quick.
interested in buying a bunch of old He-Man toys, please
Hey,
contact me if you live in
you
Phoenix.
sell those on eBay.
Yeah,
You'll
they bring a
yeah,
lot of money on
Yeah.
make
eBay.
some money
I
on those.
I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And that's the other thing. It was just, I live 2,000 miles away. I don't want to have to burden my in-laws or my cousins who
Mhm.
still live there.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the decisions were made with, I don't have the bandwidth to
Yeah. Yeah.
take pictures of each of those toys, put them up, bring
Right.
them all back to Michigan,
Mhm.
and
Phoenix,
then put them
Phoenix
up
may
for
have a,
sale.
just so you know, Phoenix may have an old toy store because I know Albuquerque does, and they had a whole, last time I was there, they had a whole shelf full of He-Man toys they were selling on consignment.
Yeah,
for somebody.
Huh.
Yeah, so something like that might work.
yeah. And again, I was there for a week, and so I had to make a lot of
Yeah,
decisions on what I have,
right?
still have most of a house to clean. What do I do? Like,
Mhm.
is the return going to be
Right.
worth not getting this done? Right. And so it
I
was,
don't know, that
and there was,
Skeletor may just send you on a trip to Cancun or something.
everybody says that about stuff, but I don't, I've never on a cruise or anything heard anybody like, thank goodness we sold that He-Man toy and we could afford this. Like, no, I think that's just an old wives' tale that just goes around like, oh yeah, you sell this beanie, you can hold on to this beanie baby, it's gonna be worth something someday. Like,
Yeah, my
if it
dad
was
used to
still in
say
my,
that all the time. We need to save it because it might be worth something.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a
yeah,
question from me, Dan. First of all, did you know that your dad saved all of your toys?
yeah, because
You did,
he
okay.
would he would frequently remind me that I needed to get my crap out of his house when
Well,
my
then
wife
that,
and I first got married, and I definitely avoided that by
but why
moving
did he
2,000
save
miles
them?
away,
Why did he save them? Why didn't he just get rid of them
because they
himself?
were so far under the stairs
Yeah.
that it was not worth his time and effort to go get them. It took me about 10 hours to get to the
Wow.
boxes
Ah,
of cleaning out that closet, because it starts off where I can walk in, and then I very quickly cannot walk in and have to go down, and then
wow.
towards the
Wow.
end I'm like crouched,
Yeah.
like pulling out boxes. um I'd always remembered as a kid, because my grandmother, my mom's mom, lived upstairs from us at the funeral home that my dad owned. So the funeral home was the ground floor, then our home was the second floor, and the
Mhm.
third floor there's some apartments, and my grandma lived in one of those apartments. And I remember I would go up to see her, and she had a box that had old pictures in it, and I loved looking through those pictures when I was a kid. And when my grandma passed, gosh, it would have been around like 99 or 2000. um I just wasn't in that headspace of like, oh, I wonder where those pictures went. But later on,
Mhm.
I was like, I wonder where those pictures went. And I asked my mom, and she's like, I don't know, I think your cousin ended up with them.
Mm.
And I'd ask my cousin, and I'd be like, hey, do you have these? She's like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so, of course, what do I find going through that closet was that box of photos. And
Yay.
in that, it's the same box that I remember.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I would ask my grandma about the pictures, and I don't remember anything that she said about any of the pictures. And so some of the pictures I have to guess, and say, oh, that looks like my mom, or that
Mhm.
looks like her brother, or that looks like her sister. And so I found this very old album,
Oh, cool.
Oh.
and so in it, I will do my best to get it. So these are pictures from probably the 1940s would be my guess. So these are,
Yeah, that black paper. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So these are pictures from my mom's first communion. So she was Catholic.
Oh, oh,
And so it's my mom's first
So
communion.
sweet.
So these have very severely yellowed, as pictures are wont to do. So I'm
Mhm.
pretty excited to scan these and then use Vivid Pics to fix them.
Yes.
mhm.
And so I
The
may
black
scan some of
paper,
these and send
the
them.
black
What's
paper is
that?
what's yellow. The black paper
Uh-huh.
is what's
Yeah,
yellowed them because they've been touching them for all these years.
Ah.
yeah.
When
And fortunately,
was your mom born? What, I'm just trying to place
she was
this.
born in, let's see, my dad was born in 42. My mom would have been born in 46.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and then there's, I'm gonna see if I can remove this one, because fortunately they didn't glue the pictures in.
I
Oh,
saw the
They have,
corners. I'd hoping they didn't glue them in.
yeah.
yeah, they did not glue them in. I'm like, thank you, like
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
glue
heavenly
that
high
they
five
used,
to my
yeah, the glue
grandmother.
that they used back then, I don't know what kind of glue it was, but it is the strongest glue.
Mm-hmm.
Made from
Mm-hmm.
real horse. Yeah, like
Yes.
it's, yeah, it's a horse. Anyway, this is probably my favorite picture of my mom that I found.
Oh,
Oh, that's so sweet.
that's
So
so cute.
there's no year on this, but my guess is she's probably two, maybe three.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would have been that. So her dad was in the border patrol during the war, and
Oh.
so he patrolled the border. They lived in Detroit, and so I have pictures of him because he was a boat cop for Detroit. And
Hmm.
so during the war, he served in the military doing that as a border patrol agent. And so I have pictures of him on his patrol boat, um, with his gun pointed towards Canada, to keep them away.
A dangerous
Um,
place.
Yeah.
yeah, very, very dangerous. Um, and so anyway, so I found a bunch of other things, and the thing that was in that folder, in that box, that just absolutely made my jaw drop, um, was a picture that I did not recall seeing as a child, but I am absolutely grateful that it is there, and that is this. Oh, sorry, it's really bad. There we go. So this is my grandmother's family before they left Hungary in
Oh,
1922.
Wow.
I can tell it's
wow.
before they left Hungary because her older sister Magdalena is in the picture. One of her older
Mhm.
sisters is in the picture, and she stayed behind. So their
Oh.
family were part of a group that was being persecuted by the ethnic Hungarians.
Mhm.
And so to kind of afford them a little bit of safety as they were saving up money to come to America, Magdalena was married off to an older widower, and who was Hungarian. And and they had to move from the southern part of the country where they were from, where their family had lived for 400 years, and their ethnic identity sort of preserved in this region called the Banat, to this tiny little fishing village on the Danube. And they were there for, let's see, the war ended in 1919. They were there until 22. So they were there for 3 years, saving up money. And it wasn't in this collection, but I have a letter from my great great grandfather, so my grandmother's grandfather, to her uncle, who was already living in the States, that where he talked about how much he misses being able to go visit his wife's grave. But he's very excited, and he hopes that they'll have earned enough money to come to America soon, and that he'll be able to see his son once again. And then that's making up for this longing that he has to be able to go and visit his wife. He didn't survive. He died about 6 months after he wrote that letter, and is not buried next to his wife. He's buried on the other side of the country. But this is the first time that I ever have seen a picture of my great grandparents. I had never seen their faces before. I'd never seen any of them before, with the exception of my grandmother. And so to have a family portrait of all of them together was just, it's the only time I stopped and was emotional during the whole process,
I'll bet.
because it was just, I just needed a moment. Like I went and just took a little walk outside and just had to like be focused, because it was very clear to me. I'm a person of faith, and so I prayed before I started, and it was very very clear thought in my head to not look at pictures, because otherwise it would never get done, because I'd just get distracted and go into genealogist mode and start trying to figure stuff out, right? I'm just putting these pictures up there, and I'm hoping Mary will have this all done for me by like the end of the program. She'll just know, like, oh,
I've
that
already
picture
asked
from
about when your
Austria-Hungary
mom's
was
bored. I mean, I'm like ready, Dan.
that was taken at the studio in Žur in Hungary, and this year, because I can tell because of the background, blah blah blah. But anyway, but just this was the only time that I got emotional, because I'd never seen their faces before, and it just made it real. And a lot of my dad's family history, they've been here in the United States since before it was the United States. I mean, prior to the revolution, pretty much on all of my dad's lines, and a lot of that research has already been done. And my mom's side, her dad's family was from Canada. Relatively easy research going back. The Hungarian side is hard and slow and painful, and in like 20 different languages, because of the Treaty of Versailles, and it's in like 15 different countries, and it's just this slog of research. And so most of my personal research has been researching this family, and like going through unindexed records in a language I don't speak, just like trying to find, like going through page by page by page by page in the town that they lived in, looking at the church books, and then to finally see their faces, it was overwhelming. Like I feel like, of all of my ancestors that I've never met, that died, decades or more before I was born, I feel the closest to them, because I've done so much research on their families, and to finally see them was just, it was too much. I needed to take a break and just walk for a second and just take a deep breath, put the picture away, knowing that I'd see it again, because I just didn't want to stop looking at it. Like even now I'm having a hard time like not looking at the picture, because it's just so crisp and so clear and so well done, considering that this is probably 1922, and really the last time the whole family was together, because their youngest sister, Irene, who my mom is named after, died of tuberculosis before Magdalena and her family moved to the United States. So the family was never together again after this, after they left Hungary.
Which one's your grandma? Can you point her out, please?
Yeah, so my grandmother is this beautiful young lady right here.
Okay.
That is amazing. And to think it
That's
was
so
there the
cool.
whole time it's been there.
The whole time. it's
It's a
been,
perfect
I mean,
example of never giving up.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so that was, for me, that was just the most overwhelming
Oh, yeah.
emotionally to do. Some of the other stuff, like after everyone would leave at night, sometimes I would sneak in like an hour of looking through pictures, you know, just because. And so I would do that. And so as I was going through my grandma's box, I found another thing that was super special. So after my grandfather was done with, being working as a border patrol agent, he got a job as a truck driver, and he was Catholic. And so he kept this with him. This is his personal rosary, and
Oh,
then this little thing that says, "I am a Catholic. In case of accident, please call a priest."
oh,
Oh, neat.
And then it says Apostleship of Prayer, Sacred Heart, and then on the back there's a little prayer, and then his personal rosary is down here in the
that's
pocket.
wonderful.
So cool.
That is
And
precious. That is so precious.
so it's, I mean, just absolutely, you can tell there's some stuff missing that used to be able to clip together.
Yeah.
And he would just, and my mom told me stories about this being in the dashboard of his truck as he was driving truck and would drive around the Detroit area and up to Saginaw and other places.
Mhm,
He would have this in his truck just in case there was an accident
mhm,
and he got injured. He
mhm.
then had access to a rosary,
Mhm.
and then with a note for them to call a
Yeah.
priest. And so I thought that was kind of cool.
Did you,
Um,
did you find your mom's rosary, or do you have your mom's rosary from that first communion?
my sister has her rosary, so
Okay.
so we have, so I'm really hoping my sister doesn't watch this episode. So, or anyone I'm related to, because um, because a lot of these are treasures that no one knows
That
existed
you found.
until I
We
found
won't
them.
tell anybody.
Won't tell anybody.
Right. And so my plan, dear family, is to digitize all of these, high resolution scanning, and then we all get them.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
I will put them on a flash
Awesome.
drive.
Yeah.
Everyone gets them. I'm not
Right.
hoarding them. I am simply the
Yeah.
caretaker of
Preserving
them.
That's
Right.
right.
And
That's right.
because literally I have two cigar boxes of photos of my dad growing up. I have pictures from my mom's parents' honeymoon at Niagara Falls in the
No.
1930s, right? I
Love it.
mean, like it's like the kids were looking at them, they're like, that still is what it looks like today. I was like, it's a waterfall. It's not going to change that much in 90 years. Like, they're like, they're on the Canadian side. I'm like, good observation skills. Like, they're like, but like they could see, the Maid of they're like, that boat's still there. I was like, it probably is a different boat. I'm sure they've upgraded the Maid of the Mist in the last 90 years, but like, um, but yes, it's essentially the same boat. But there's that connection because they've been there too, right? And so what all of that stuff, dear family, is going to get digitized and preserved, and then the metadata
Oh,
labeled,
treasured, yes.
so it'll all go in. If something is unknown, I will mark it as unknown.
Yeah.
We'll all have an opportunity to share it and work on it together. um it's not that I'm hoarding it, I am just taking care of
Right.
it. Same thing with all
Right.
those photos from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s that didn't quite make the cut.
Yeah.
All of those will be digitized. My sister and I will go through all the pictures of our kids to make sure that we
Yeah.
have them already. And so we'll go through all that. So I just have a few more things if we've got time.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
So I found some stuff from my dad's dad. So my dad's dad, I never met. So he passed away before I was born, as did my mom's dad. But I just missed my dad's dad. So he died in 76 and I was born in 79. So we just missed each other, right?
Mhm.
And so, but I've always had this sort of feeling of connection with him that I just really can't explain. Like, I've always just like felt a closeness and a kinship with him. I don't know if it's because we both like music. He was a professional jazz musician.
Oh, wow.
And I love listening to and playing music of all varieties. I've got a ton of musical instruments just about everywhere. If it's got strings, I can play it. I've got a Tibetan singing bowl. Like, I like music, right? Um, and so when I found some of his stuff, it was there are some things that really kind of I was like, that's cool. So this was one of them. So I know that's hard to read. It says the New Webster Dictionary. When you open it up, it has his name written in it, and it says Donald Earl, age 12, 1929.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
I love it.
Oh,
And so this was his from school. Now
yeah.
his I don't know if you can read that because I have a hard time reading it, looking directly at it. But it's a dictionary of sorts. Um, his mom was a school teacher, so his dad, Will Earl, had been married to a woman. She passed away relatively young. And he was a single dad trying to raise his son by himself, and fell in love with his son's school teacher. And
Oh.
then they got married. They had 4 kids. The oldest of those 4 was my grandfather.
Oh.
And so schooling was always super important to my grandfather, um, because it was important to his mom, who was a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was always, and he grew up in a very, very small town called Buckley, Michigan. That if you fall asleep at the wheel, and you go off the road, you won't hit anything because there's like nothing there. Um, there used to be a post office there, but not anymore. Somebody from like Cadillac, I think, drives up twice a week and just drops off mail for both people that live in Buckley. And it's but they have a tractor festival every year and it's awesome. So go to the Buckley Steam Engine Festival. But he actually moved to Traverse City to go to high school because he wanted that opportunity to be able to go to high school. Because this again is the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something everybody did. Sometimes
Right.
you did your
Yep.
freshman year of high school and then you went and you got
Right.
a job because
Yeah.
I mean small hands, they fit inside of the gears in the factory. So go work,
Mm-hmm.
chop chop.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the
Mhm.
8-hour work week and child labor laws and stuff. So you just would go and work. But my grandfather wanted to go to school and to better himself, and so he went. And on the recommendation of another school teacher, whose little sister he ended up marrying, my grandmother. And so there's all this connection with school and things like that. So finding this little dictionary
Yeah.
with his name in it from
That's
when he was
fun.
12 years old was
Oh.
super cool. Um, so I'd always been told stories of my grandfather playing in a jazz band. When World War II started, he decided to volunteer. And when he said, "Hey, by the way, I'm a professional jazz musician," they handed him his army issued drumsticks, and that was it. Like he never saw action. He was
Yeah.
that's what he did is he played drums for the army. Um, and so going through some pictures, I found this
Oh.
picture of
Ah,
the jazz band. So there's my grandfather at the drum kit, and this is
Wow.
Art Pelletier. So I don't know if that's the name of the band, but it's sitting on top of somebody's guitar case, and in neon it looks like. And so yeah, so this is the jazz band.
that's great.
And
They're
where did they play? What did
in the
they did he
Detroit
go?
area.
Okay,
So they
just
were
so he didn't go overseas to play for the troops or anything like that.
oh no, when he was in the army. So this wasn't from the army. This
Oh,
was
okay.
just another when he was out of the army.
Oh, okay.
Um, but no, when he was in the army, I believe he was stationed on the West Coast. So I haven't been
Oh,
able to. I haven't taken the time to pull
yeah.
his military records yet. But
Yeah.
um,
Reason why I ask, because my grandfather served in World War II and was in San Francisco for a while, waiting to be deployed over to the South Pacific. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if
Mm,
he heard your
Yeah.
grandfather's
he made
yeah.
band play?
so my dad said, so I haven't verified it. This is my dad said that that's what he did was he was on the West Coast and just was
Yeah,
in California. And that's
yeah,
where my dad's little brother was born during the war. He's one of the few kids that was born during the war
yeah.
who had a dad that was serving because my grandfather wasn't serving
Yes,
overseas and
exactly.
could zip home
Yeah,
for a,
yeah,
conjugal visit and
yeah,
zip back, and
yeah.
Where,
it's
where in California?
That I don't know. So I don't have his service
Yeah,
record that
that's
outlines
where
like
my
where he
mind
was.
went, because wouldn't that be like, genealogy
Yeah,
serendipity if
Yes, yes.
all
Yeah.
right. You heard his band. So as I was going through, there was a box that I pulled out and it just said Don's stuff. And it was in my grandmother's handwriting. And so as I was going through it, a lot of it was, pictures. My grandfather was an executive for the United Auto Workers Union. He was Walter Reuther's personal secretary. Like he just was a big deal in the UAW.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that in just a second. But as I was going through the stuff, um, there was an envelope addressed to him, and the address label just says the White House. So it just says the White
Ooh,
House.
ooh.
And I was like, well, that's curious. You don't see that very often. And so when I opened it up inside, um, oh, and of course, this isn't it. What in the world? I grabbed the wrong thing. There was another one from the White House, and it's in the other room. I swear it's there. It's an invitation to attend the inauguration of Lyndon B. Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Not
Very
just like
cool.
in it, and there was a letter in there that said, in recognition of your work on the campaign to get President Johnson reelected, we cordially invite you and your spouse and your wife to attend the inauguration of Lyndon B. Johnson in
Oh,
Washington,
wow.
D.C.
Very
on this date.
cool.
Wow.
Right?
Very cool.
This is when my grandfather passed. This is a signed statement from President Ford that says the United States of America honors the memory of Donald A. Earl. The certificate is awarded by a grateful nation in recognition of devoted and selfless consecration to the service of our country and the armed forces of the United States. Wet signature, Gerald R. Ford.
Wow.
Um, and just a lot of other things, right? I feel terrible. I grabbed the wrong thing. I just saw the envelope that said White House. I, it's an awesome problem to have so many
Oh,
letters from the
yes,
White House
Yeah.
that get all
exactly.
Right, right.
confused, right?
Well, you have to scan that one and Cheri can link to it.
That's right.
Yes,
You gotta
I
send
will
it to me.
scan it
Yeah,
and link it.
yeah.
So the last thing that I'll share is I don't know how well versed our viewers are in UAW lore, but Leonard Woodcock was the president of the UAW in the 70s. And after my grandfather passed away rather unexpectedly and fairly young of a heart attack in his 60s while playing golf, um, there was a letter from the UAW, from the office of Leonard Woodcock, um, sent to my grandmother that says, Dear Mrs. Earl, encloses a memorial resolution adopted by the International Executive Board at its recent meeting. Um, and it outlines all of the stuff that my grandfather did as a part of the labor movement. Um, he was the first to organize white collar workers at the Dodge main plant in the 1930s
Wow.
at the risk of his job. Um, when he found out that the blue collar workers were starting a union, he was trying to get the white collar guys were usually on the side of the owners. And here he is trying to convince these guys, like, we should start a union too, because then we get all the same benefits that the other guys get. We don't have to individually negotiate contracts. We can do all that stuff. And he did that when he was 19,
Oh,
What?
wow.
right?
Wow.
Um, and then it talks about when he was the president of the local 889 white collars union. He became the union president there. And then when he got called up to the main office when he was Walter Reuther's secretary, and his job was to handle election disputes in local unions. So every time that there was an election dispute in the local union, it was my grandfather that would go. There's and it's signed by Leonard Woodcock and Emil Mazie, who was the secretary treasurer, dated August 11th, 1976. And there's just tons of pictures of him and with like Walter Reuther. I remember one of the weirdest places I've given a genealogy presentation is at Ford World headquarters in Dearborn, Michigan, because they have a genealogy club there. And they asked me to speak, and I went, and we were in this room with this big oval table in it, and they had some old pictures in the back, and that was the negotiation room. That's where the union
Mhm.
comes in and negotiates with Ford to, keep everything going. And it was fairly early in my speaking career, and so I got there like 4 hours early, right? Just to get everything set up, and had everything set up, and I was just sort of sitting there, and I was like, so I went back to look at those pictures, and in one of the pictures, there's Walter Reuther, and then just on the edge of the photograph, you can see half of my grandfather's face
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
in the very room that I'm giving a presentation in,
Wow.
some like 50 years later, right? And so to have this signed resolution from the
Yeah,
UAW,
yeah,
like outlining everything that he did at 19 years old,
yeah.
starting a white collar workers union.
That's
And the only reason why he had a white collar job was because he went to high school, and
mhm.
because education was important to him, because
Yeah,
he listened to his mom, because he did all those
oh,
things. And he was able
very
to
cool.
provide for my dad and his brother,
Yeah.
and buy him Foxy.
And by Foxy.
Oh,
Oh, Dan, what an experience
That's
that
treasure.
was. Just to be
Yeah.
able to find all those things. Now, I gotta ask you one other question though. You mentioned
Mhm.
a loom.
Yes,
Tell us about the
I am.
loom.
I am literally an heir to a loom. Um, and so my dad had up on this little shelf in the living room. There's like a little shelf thing. Up there were two things. There's this old butter churn that I remember
Oh,
being in my grandmother's house. And I asked my dad about it. It was like, "Oh, is that the old family butter churn?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "I remember seeing it." He's like, when he was younger, he's like, "But I don't remember if it was like in our house when I was a kid. Like my mom bought butter at the store. She didn't churn butter." He's like, it's like we weren't destitute, He's like, she wasn't like churning butter in the back for money. Um, and I was like, okay, that's fair. So I kept that. But then the other thing that was up there was this tabletop loom. So I'm sorry I don't have a picture of it, but it's in a storage unit in Phoenix, and it's maybe a little bit wider than my laptop. My laptop's 15 inches, and so it's probably maybe 18 inches or so, about a foot and a half wide. And and on it, it's all the parts that you'd expect for a loom, where the warp and the weft. Did I get that right, Mary? And I'm assuming I don't know. Um, and and anyway, and so like, and the thing is there's a scarf or a blanket or something that's partially done
Mm,
that my great grandfather was working on when he died.
My
Oh,
gosh.
wow.
And so that's forever in the loom. And
yeah.
so now I have the painful decision of deciding, do I finish it? And then we can continue to use the loom to make scarves or table runners or whatever you can make that's, roughly 18 inches wide. Um, or do I leave that in there and keep the story?
Mhm.
Right. And
What
so
do you
that's
what do
the,
you guys think? What do you guys think? Any opinions?
I think it would mean more to be used,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
know about using the stuff and Melissa and I
Yeah.
probably disagree, but I think that the connection with it is increased by using it.
Oh, yeah. I would get it checked out by someone who knows about those things. Just make sure it's stable and, you know, can be used. It's not missing something, a piece or a part or something.
One thing I just, as I'm listening to you, it makes me happy that take this the right way. You're the age that you are to discover all this, because
Yes.
if you were 19 years old, and I think you would feel differently. You have a
Mhm,
family, you have children
mhm.
now. I
Yeah.
just I love that this was the right time in your life to find all of this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
yeah, I think 18 or 19-year-old Dan would have made a lot different decisions. I would have been showing you guys my He-Man collection
Yeah.
and been like, "Oh yeah, there's a bunch of old photos I chucked," you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I would have, even 19-year-old Dan would have probably kept the photos, but like,
Mhm.
there's some things that I kept that, I don't know that I would have otherwise kept.
Mhm.
Foxy.
My Foxy, My mom and dad, when we were younger, we did a lot of reenactment of the fur trapping times.
Mhm.
And so my mom got really into leather work. And so my mom made a buckskin dress for
Oh,
her,
Mm.
for
wow.
herself. My 13-year-old daughter happens to be the exact size that my mom
Oh,
was. And so, I actually have a picture of it on my phone, which won't be the best, um,
very cool.
but it's a picture. Let me see. Oh, it's pictures of my son. There we go. So
So she's wearing.
Oh, how
Ah,
cool.
there's no
Yeah.
way for me to get that to not look all whited out,
yeah,
but
yeah. Oh,
I
Yeah,
wow.
you
trust
can
Yeah,
me,
see
we
the
did
that's
it.
Cool.
fringe at the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yeah, we
yeah.
did
And
it.
so anyway, so there was things like that that 19-year-old me wouldn't have kept.
Right.
I did a video chat with my wife, and even though a lot of the stuff in my mom's curio cabinet was just stuff she bought, she loved going to estate sales. She'd go
Mhm.
antiquing all
Yeah.
the time. So most of the antiques were in my parents' house have no connection to our family. It's
Yeah.
just something
Yeah.
she bought.
Yeah. Of
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of those are going to end up right back in an estate sale.
course.
Um,
Yes.
but I video chatted with my wife, and each of my girls got to pick something from the curio cabinet, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Each of my boys got to select one of my dad's ties to keep,
Yeah.
so that they can wear that
Yeah.
to church. They can take it
Yeah.
with them as they go on missions and other things. Like
Yeah.
my son that's currently in Africa on a mission has one of my dad's ties, so that way my dad goes with
Yeah.
him a little bit,
Exactly.
And so there's like little things like that that 19-year-old Dan wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
thought of. That
Not
wouldn't
to
have been like,
do.
oh yeah, that's something that's worth
Right.
preserving and keeping and having around to discuss,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I've got a storage unit in Phoenix filled with other treasures. The table that when I was young, my sister was chasing me, as older sisters are wont to do, and I ran smack into a table and cut my head open,
Oh
and
gosh.
like, so I still have a scar on my forehead from it, from when my sister tried to murder me. She wanted to be back. She was like reminiscing about being an only child, and she's like, "Ah, this is my chance. I can make it look like an accident." Because I think she tripped me. She says that she didn't. That I just ran into it myself because I'm clumsy. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Um, we remember it differently.
Of
But I
course.
kept that table, um, just so I can have it and have it in my house. So every time my sister comes and visits, I can point it out to her. So we've got the near murder weapon. Um, I've got my great grandmother's rocking chair in
Oh,
there.
good. Yes. Yes.
We kept. I
Yeah.
mean, just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
things like that were just like,
Yeah.
my grandfather's bookshelves,
Mm-hmm.
that he had in his office at the UAW,
Yeah.
that he took with him when he retired, and have been in our family ever since. And
Right.
you know, and so just things like that are too big to show on TV, but just
And
so
it's
I've
a
got a
hard
storage unit with that
process.
stuff.
It's a
Yeah.
hard process to go through. I understand because I had to do that with my mom, my grandmother and my mom's house. And it's hard. It's hard to get rid of things that those are things that you saw every time you went to visit, those
Mhm.
are just things. We just moved a dresser that we kept that's been in storage up to one of the rooms in my house, and I open it up and it just smells like my grandmother's house. And
Mhm.
so I was just like things like that, it
Yeah.
just I was right back to into her house, but it's hard to go through and get rid of things that bring back so many memories. So, you know, and you can't keep everything. You just there's no
Can't.
Yeah.
room. There's no room to keep everything. So that's when
Unless people there's still time to donate to the Dave and Irene
that's
Earl Museum. People,
if
if
anybody
viewers
wants,
want to
yeah.
donate, just reach out
So
and reach
the
out to Cheri.
that's right. Reach out to me. Photos of things,
Yeah.
donating, giving things away like the dress. My granddaughter wore one of my mom's prom dresses to her prom this past year because they took it to a lady in town and had it fitted for my granddaughter. So you can do things like that so that things can still
Yes.
Yeah.
stay in the family, but it's hard to know what to throw away. And they do have so much stuff. I look around my house and I think, oh, my poor kids. But the thing is, the majority of the stuff, I don't care if they throw it away because these are things that right now are bringing me joy. When I'm not here any longer, they're not going to be bringing anybody any joy. So give them to somebody, donate them so other people can have joy with them. But there are the family heirlooms that I've written little notes on, and so that they know what they are, so they won't hopefully throw them away. But
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and to me, I think a lot of the stuff that I kept is stuff that there's a connection and there's a story that goes with it. And so
yes,
and that story is very transferable. That's
exactly.
the one thing that both of my grandmothers were very good at. It was sharing stories and family
Good.
stories and
Yes.
talking about things.
Yeah.
And so I kept things that connect back to that. Like my dad's mom loved sewing. She sewed
Mhm.
dolls for each of her grandkids.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so our dolls were still there. And so
Yeah.
a crate with dolls in it that my grandmother made. Um,
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, just things like that. My oldest daughter, the one who was in the buckskin dress, loves to cook and bake.
Mhm.
And so I found this old recipe book of Hungarian recipes from
Oh,
1956.
Oh, wow.
Um,
that's
and so she and I were looking through it the other day, and she's like, we'd gotten back from church on Sunday, and she's like, Dad, can I make something from the Hungarian cookbook? And I was like, yeah. And so we looked, and we simply did not have enough eggs and sour cream in anything that was in there. It was like you are cooking for 100 people. It's like take 4.5 pounds of flour, put 6 dozen eggs, you know, 2 pints of sour cream, mix well, and it's
too
like,
funny.
what are they doing? Like, how many people are they feeding? Like the whole country, like one person at a
Yep.
time makes cookies in Hungary, and they feed
Yep.
everybody else. Um, but she was just looking through, and she's got super
Wow.
excited about those things. I kept
Right.
the church cookbook from the church that I went to growing
Yeah.
up, and there's a lot of like recipes that my mom had thrown in there and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Because when my wife and I got married, my mom made a cookbook of family recipes
Mm-hmm.
and gave that as a
Mm.
gift to my wife.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were photocopies. And the problem with photocopies is you don't see what's on the back, right? And
Ah,
so now we have the front and
yes.
back of a lot of those
Yeah.
recipes.
Yeah.
Not that my mom like skipped
Yeah.
out on like what do we put the oven at? Like we weren't
Bake
like
at,
missing,
yeah.
Gotcha.
like
I gotcha.
preheat the oven to, and you're like, there's nothing there. What do I preheat the oven to? Um, but just like, sometimes there's another recipe on the back, and sometimes
Sure.
there's,
Yeah.
all those different things. And so, there's
Yeah.
things like that we kept. I took a lot of pictures of stuff. Like this is
Good.
what it looked
Good.
like, and like
Yeah.
took modern pictures
Yeah.
of a lot of my dad's art because I don't
Yeah.
collect Western art.
Yeah.
My dad was like, he's like, if you don't want them, he's like, then let's just sell them. He's like, you can get some decent money for them, and let's just do that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, because but part of me was like, I kind of want to keep them, but I don't have
Yeah. It's
enough
hard.
Yeah.
wall
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
to put,
hard. It's hard.
you know,
It is
Yeah,
hard.
it's
Yeah.
really hard. So, um, before we go, tell me what's something that you have from your favorite thing from an ancestor. What have you been able to find either going through someone's home or that was gifted to you? That's a treasure that you hope your family's not going to throw away after you're gone. Who would like to start? There's got to be something that you have.
Oh, I'll go first.
Okay.
There's several things because being an archivist and a genealogist, I don't have a whole lot from my family because it just wasn't saved. But the
Uh-huh.
one thing I do have, and you can't see it because it's right above me on the wall, but it is a painting by my great aunt. Her
Oh,
name was Odella Drummond Mack, M-A-C-K. And people who know me know that I love snow. And so it's actually a snow painting of a
oh,
cabin,
nice.
of the homestead cabin of the Drummond family. and she painted it herself, and it
Oh,
hangs.
that's
I got it when my
wonderful.
parents passed away.
Yeah.
When my mom passed away in 2017, and so and it hangs right above my desk.
Oh, that's
Mm.
beautiful. What about you, Mary?
Um, I have my grandfather's diploma from Dartmouth.
Oh,
And it's actual sheepskin. I mean, they call them sheepskin. Well, this
yeah.
one was real sheepskin and all in Latin, including and even Latinicized his name. And when I was working on my KDP for certification,
Mhm.
um, I did his family, and I spent a lot of time, um, trying to find even his college records.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that one just is really important to me. And and this is something I talk about,
Yeah.
using them. My husband's a university professor, and I'm a genealogist. And I have about 20, maybe more, family diplomas that we have framed and put
Oh,
in the
that's
stairwell.
beautiful.
Great.
That's
So it
great.
kind of,
That's
the-
cool.
I
the-
love that.
That's
the
cool.
connection of genealogy and and education.
Yeah.
Wow. What about you, Jenny?
I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of stuff from my dad's side, but the one thing, too many things to mention. But on my
That's how I
that's a
feel.
whole complicated thing.
Mhm.
But on my mother's side, I was named after her mother, my grandmother, and so I have my grandmother's engagement ring.
Mm.
And uh, when she passed away a couple months before I got married. And it was always, it was always known that I would get the ring, and because she wanted me to have it. And so my aunt, my mother's sister, came to my wedding that day, and she, after we got married, she gave me the ring. And luckily, my grandmother had sort of fat fingers, so it fit me. And I wear it every day. I don't ever take it off. So
Oh, I
it's a
love
lot to
that.
me.
I love that.
Mhm.
My mom calls me the keeper of all things. Everybody knows that I'll take it, I'll take the stuff. So I've got a lot of things, but recently I was looking again at some letters that my grandfather wrote because he died in World War II. And these letters were talking about my mom when she was a kid. And so those are just so precious to me and precious to my mom. I love those. And I've got a bowl that my grandmother says she used to feed him breakfast in every morning. And so that's really precious. And so I think right now I'm kind of leaning towards the things that I know and I've learned and I have from my grandfather. So yeah, but I've got a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that's just precious and just I
Mhm.
think it just helps them stay alive, as
Yeah.
we can touch the things that they've touched and learn from them through letters or um activities that they did or any of those kind of things. I think it helps us keep that connection going and keep them alive for ourselves and for our children and for their children and teach them about their family and those family connections. So Dan, I'm so glad you're able to do this. I know it's a hard thing to go through and you still have things to go through. It's hard to make those decisions and you just have to everybody's different in how they make those decisions, everybody's different in what means what to people and I like you let my grandkids come in and each choose something. Mom had a bunch of birdhouses hanging up and so for Christmas, not this past year but the Christmas before, every family got one for birdhouses and just that type of thing. And so there's things that we can do because we can't keep it all, but we
Well,
can
we
find
can't.
ways to share it within the family. So
I think the main thing,
yeah,
we can't keep it all physically,
yeah,
but we can keep it all in our genealogy, which we could pass
exactly,
down. The
exactly,
things that we're talking about that we can't keep, write about it,
exactly.
document it,
Yeah,
and then you'll pass it on to your descendants.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Dan, for coming and sharing with us your many, I don't know, I guess your journey into your family, your
Yeah.
family's home and finding all those wonderful things and finding all the stuff. I mean, what else will you call it but stuff, important family stuff. So thank you for coming and sharing that with us. And we would love to hear from you as you listen and hear about all these things that Dan was finding, the things that we've discussed that we have. We would love to know what you have. What have you discovered? What has brought you great joy and learning about your family members? We'd love to hear from you and see what kind of stuff that you have that you're hoping to keep and pass down to the up and coming generation. So with that, we'll say thanks again to Dan for being here with us tonight. And thanks, ladies, for being here too and asking your questions and supporting Dan as he went through this journey. And I don't know if we can get that fundraising going for him, but he knows we're behind him every other way, right? So, and with that, we'll see you next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.